So if you're asked to factor, and if it's a trinomial, the goal should be to try to make two parentheses like this, and then some stuff on the inside. But it's trickier when you have a negative sign in front of an exponent. It's even more tricky when you have a number in front of your x squared, because we can't jump right to two parentheses. We have to use a bit of a longer method. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide everything by a -1. You should make it a rule of thumb not to try not to factor when you have a negative sign in front of your leading coefficient, in front of the number, in front of a, as it's sometimes called. The first number can't be negative. So if I divide everything by a -1, I have 9x squared plus x minus 10. Okay, so let's take this guy, let's factor it. We just can't forget that we factored out a -1 from the beginning. So if you're trying to factor and a is not 1 like this is, you have to use a bit of a longer method. The first step, so my phone typing skills aren't so good, bumpers, but the first step is multiply the first and the last numbers. So that's 9 times -10. Make sure to watch and take your negative sign with you. So in my first step, I have -90. This isn't really quick math. I'm taking a long time. There we go. That's the first step. Second step is to look back at your expression and find two numbers that multiply to be the number you found in step 1, but add to be the middle number. And look, there's no number written there in the middle. It's just an x. So you can put a 1 there. Okay. So we got to find two numbers that multiply to be our -90, but add up to be 1. So it'll take you a while to think of the pair. Maybe use a calculator and see what you can divide -90 by. But the pair should be, the pair is 10 and -9. Because 10 times -9 makes -90, and 10 plus -9 makes 1. Third step is you got to rewrite the pair, rewrite with the middle term with the pair you found in step 2. So we're looking at this guy. We're going to rewrite it with that 10 and that -9. Okay, so our expression becomes this. 9x squared. And then we said it was a positive 10 and a -9, so we're going to put plus 10x minus 9x. And then we're going to finish it out with the minus 10, just as it says up there. Okay. So we did what that step asked for. The middle term was 1x. Now we rewrote it with 10x minus 9x. That simplifies to be this guy up here. And we just can't forget we factored out a -1. We're going to want to remember that for the end. Now the fourth step should be to make two groups. This step's pretty quick. Just take a look at the thing you're trying to factor, not this -1, but this right here. 9x squared plus 10x. We're going to make a group there. And then we'll make a group for these guys over here. Okay, you just put two parentheses, one side of parentheses around these guys, one side of parentheses around those guys. Step 5. Step 5 is to factor out what you can from each group. So looking at this first parentheses, and that's not a comma. Let me fix that. Yeah, so looking at this first parentheses, the biggest thing we can take out of this parentheses is just an x. So I'm going to write an x on the outside, and I've got 9x plus 10 left over on the inside. So let's look at the next parentheses. There's nothing you can take out of -9 and 10 evenly, but you should take a -1. The goal should always be to keep that leading term positive. So it went from -9x to positive 9x. Okay, so there, we factored out what we could from that parentheses. So that's step 5, and the final step is step 6. Step 6 is where we get our answer. You make one parentheses of the stuff on the outside and one of the duplicated stuff. So what we mean by duplicated stuff is every time you do this by magic, you should have 9x plus 10 and 9x plus 10. That's a plus because we factored out a -1. So that should happen. That's the duplicated parentheses is talking about, and this is the outside stuff. We got x minus 1 on the outside. We got 9x plus 10 for the duplicated parentheses. And then there's that -1 that we factored out to begin with. So this is the factored form, but in general, they usually like you distribute that -1 back in. They'll say 1 minus x is the correct answer. And if you're not sure of where I rotated that from, look, -1 times x makes a -x, and -1 times -1 makes a +1. And usually we just write terms, we write binomials or any sort of polynomial with leading coefficient positive. Well, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you distribute the -1 and multiply it to the inside of a parentheses. So this is it. This is factored form. If you multiply this out, you get what you started with.